Um, we do have a problem with Fox News. I like to call it faux. The cable TV channel. Basically, it isn't just what it is. It's also what it's not. It is often a purveyor of propaganda and misinformation, and what it's not is any source of news or any viable information, at least, but not by any normal definition. This is a conclusion that we have drawn from a fascinating new study in which the Fox News TV viewers, and they paid them to watch. Of course, I wouldn't pay them to watch this channel, but this is what some people did. Um, People paid the Fox TV viewers to watch CNN for a month. Now, there's other news channels you can watch. CNN doesn't have to be one that you have to watch, but the study titled The Manifold Effects of Partisan Media on Viewers' Beliefs and Attitudes, a field experiment with Fox News viewers. It was performed by parapolitical scientist David Brockman, who teaches at UC Berkeley, and Joshua Kalla, who teaches at Yale. Now, according to both of them, when these Fox viewers watch CNN, they heard all sorts of things that Fox wasn't telling them, and they processed that information. They took it in. They became more knowledgeable about what was really going on in the United States. Um, the experiment didn't change their political preferences, certainly not in just 1 month, but it slightly altered their perceptions of certain key issues and the political candidates that are running. The study authors differentiated between traditionally emphasized forms of media influence, like agenda setting and framing, and what they call partisan coverage filtering, the choice to selectively report information about selected topics based on what's favorable to the network's partisan side and ignore everything else. One lesson here is that Fox viewers are reachable with real news. While fact checks have been known to get people to believe falsehoods even more strongly, plain news and even opinionated news still registers to everyone. But the biggest takeaway for us is the realization that Fox viewers aren't just manipulated and misinformed; they're literally being made ignorant by their consumption habits. Watching Fox, they hear a lot of news, like things they don't hear, but they don't learn or hear about what's really happening in the real world. And here's where we are in the mainstream media, and it can do something useful. We can stop talking about Fox like a different form of news and start talking about how it isn't news at all, because it's not. It's the opposite of it. It's instead of news, it's the absence of news. We can explain more clearly that real news organizations present viewers with information that they need, regardless of whether it hurts them or helps a specific cause or political party. Now, mainstream reality-based journalists have been way too charitable to Fox over the years. I wouldn't give one fucking penny to them. Partly because the network once employed some of them, and partly to maintain the facade of a political neutrality. But it's time to firmly declare that faux is not news, because it's not. Now, the study started with 763 sycophants that were loyal to the Fox News, and then they randomly assigned 40% to a treatment group. That group was paid $15 an hour to watch up to 7 hours of CNN per week during September 2020, during what we call the primetime hours. The participants were given quizzes to make sure that they were paying attention. It found that CNN and faux were covering dramatically different things that month. The severity of COVID and the Trump administration's failures to control it were by far the most common topics that were discussed on CNN. And then on faux, they downplayed it and praised Trump's behavior. By contrast, Fox spent 15,236 words discussing the Biden Democrats Democrats' support for extreme racial ideology protests, compared to CNN's 1,300 words. The study found that the CNN watching group was much more likely to see issues covered on the CNN COVID-19 instead of what they were hearing on faux, like the racial protest, as important. The group also became more likely to agree that if Donald Trump made a mistake, of course Fox would not cover it because they would lie for him. One particularly hopeful finding was that watching CNN caused Fox viewers to become substantially more supportive of the vote by mail than the control group. Both networks covered the topic extensively, with CNN emphasizing facts about how secure it is, and Fox falsely hawking its susceptibility to fraud. The Republican measures to block Democratic constituencies from voting and challenge results not to their liking depend heavily on the Republican voters believing lies about Democrats engaging in massive fraud, when in reality, it's the Republicans committing fraud. Now, notably this, attitudes around race, climate change, and policing remain unchanged. The study authors' assertion that partisan slants happen on both sides of the cable news spectrum is the one false note in the report. Fox and CNN are not different flavors of news, they are different things entirely. News organizations with any legitimate claim to that title do not keep important information from the public based on which party it benefits. CNN is mostly an opinionated news channel, same thing with MSNBC, but they remain fundamentally fact-based. Fox does not. MSNBC, like NBC News, is part of the NBC Universal. You could certainly argue, and I hope that corporate news does its own kind of coverage filtering, but there are all sorts of things like the corporate media decides not to cover that independent journalists do, like poverty, mass incarceration, U.S. caused civilian casualties, how the Washington D.C. agenda is skewed by money, and these days pretty much anything that is good news for Biden. But mainstream media still bases its reports on evidence, not just on a whim. It doesn't hide any key elements of ongoing story, but under any circumstance, Foe cannot say the same. So if you like the video, you can give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King. You can also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out. And also, if you want to support my work even further, you can donate to my Patreon link, which you can find in the About section of my YouTube channel. And for just a little as a few bucks, for the week or month, you can help further support the channel, and that can help go a long way. And thanks for listening.